I need some traction.
Hey folks, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder of Traction and Boast.ai. Super excited for today's topic. Generative AI is all the rage these days. I can't open my LinkedIn without scrolling through dozens of posts and carousels on the topic. Thousands of generative AI tools have swarmed the market, and VC funding for startups in the space has exploded with over 2.5 billion last year. But regardless of the hype, generative AI has the power to completely transform the way we do business and reshape the customer journey. We're not just talking about improving the past. This is building the future today. And so I couldn't find two better experts than our guest today. They're going to cut through the noise and hype to give you everything you need to know about using generative AI to drive growth. Aidan Gomez, founder, CEO of Cohere, a pioneer in language AI, empowering every developer and business to build incredible products with cutting-edge natural language processing technology while keeping their data private and secure. With more than 170 million in funding and a multi-year partnership with Google Cloud, Cohere has been on a tear. And my good friend Naeem Talukdar, co-founder and CEO of Fiasco, building a new generation of sales tools powered by generative AI. In the past, he was the founder of Maker.ai, one of the earliest Gen AI startups, growing it to 7 figures revenue, thousands of customers. And even further back, he led growth at Zapier in the early days of the no-code revolution. Fiasco is the world's first generative AI-powered CRM, a self-organizing, intelligent operating system for salespeople, and it's currently in alpha. Naim has raised 36 million in funding from Coastal Ventures, Y Combinator, HubSpot, and others. Welcome to the Traction podcast, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. So, Aiden, let's start with you. Give us your backstory from researcher to founder to 170 million in funding. What led you to Cohere?
Yeah, I kind of got my start in AI as a product of being born in Canada, close to Toronto, and going to school at U of T. And obviously U of T was one of the epicenters of neural networks and deep learning and this latest revolution of AI. So I was in close proximity to some really amazing folks like Jeff Hinton and Rich Zemel and Roger Gross, Raquel Erteson. And so I was just steeped in that ecosystem of deep learning and AI. And then eventually somehow I snuck my way into Google Brain. I'm still committed to the fact that that was an accident on their part. And I spent 3 years as the perpetual intern. I spent more time inside Google offices than classrooms during my undergrad. And I was part of the team that created the Transformer. And I watched it scale across Google and start to power things like search, translate, features in Gmail and Docs. And so, yeah, it was a really extraordinary journey watching that and feeling like the technology that I had been a part of building was driving just wild change. And it was pulling forward my timelines of compelling AI by something like a quarter century. I thought at the end of my career, if I worked really, really hard, maybe we would have models that could compellingly write like humans. And then they kind of just showed up on our doorstep by scaling up these big transformer models. And so that was super exciting and inspiring. But after 3 years at Google, I just couldn't understand why the rest of industry and the product space wasn't being transformed by this tech. And my co-founders and I, eventually we decided, okay, the world isn't changing fast enough. It's going to take us, going it alone and helping the world adopt it. So yeah, Cohere is it's our effort to try and put this technology into as many hands and as many organizations as we possibly can.
Usually it takes a small group of people who are frustrated with the status quo to drive change. It doesn't come from big companies. So I'm glad you guys did that. Now, one question here, Cohere versus GPT, what is the difference?
So the underlying model is, it's similar in the sense that we're all using transformers and we're building big, large language models on data sets that are both scraped from the web as well as like we generate data in-house. I think the difference between us is maybe our orientation on the product side. So for OpenAI, they have ChatGPT. They're also like fantastic partners with Microsoft, and they're working on Bing and VS Code. For Cohere, we're very focused on enterprise. And so we're trying to help the largest and some of the smallest organizations on earth pick up this technology and put it into production, specifically in like data private and cloud agnostic scenarios.
And you guys have a multi-year partnership with Google.
Yeah. We have partnerships with a bunch of folks. Google is one of them. Definitely on the compute side, we've benefited from their TPU technology, which has been fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. So Naeem, over to you. Your backstory, what led you to Fiasco and the generative AI space? I mean, you are an engineer, head of growth at Zapier, and angel investor in Cohere. You mentioned you mortgage your life to make that only angel investment, and it's probably going to pay off more than many things. But give us your backstory.
Yeah, for sure. So I also came out of U of T. I think we were at around the same time, if I remember, Aiden. But I think you were in comp sci, and then I was on engineering science and engineering. Initially started my career in ML. So I was doing ML research, computer vision research at the University of Waterloo, nowhere near the same, caliber and scale, obviously. And then quickly kind of moved into industry. Was doing, sort of started out as a software engineer, moved into product and growth stuff. And then that led me to Zapier, where I was there fairly early on and got to see that company scale. For whatever reason, was always kind of playing with as like a front end user of natural language tech from the very early days. This was like back when even at Zapier, we were operationalizing things like, I think it was Wit AI or something, which was one of the earlier like Facebook libraries for like very, very simple natural language tasks. So it was always kind of top of mind. We went in to build started my own company, Draft, which became Maker later, which was initially a marketplace of content creators. And we basically just accidentally landed at like the epicenter of what was happening in generative AI. So GPT-3, in particular, was the first one to kind of drop. And then we had a number of other big models, Cohere being one of the major ones. And suddenly like the entire world was at our doorstep. We were at the eye of the hurricane. Of being like the very first space being disrupted by this tech. So ultimately, that business was really one of the early adopters in kind of AI content creation. It became sort of this hybrid of a marketplace of talent combined with AI content creation tools. And that business is still running. So it was a great customer base and all that. But ultimately, over the last couple of quarters, especially, I think that the models and the new developments, I think, in the models and the size and scale that they reached, we were suddenly just finding the capabilities had gotten to a point where there were just entirely new modalities of things you could build. And so after a lot of kind of thinking through it, we decided that there was we're sort of in a once in a generation moment right now. It's the second birth of the internet. And we saw that effectively every software category is going to be fundamentally changed by these LLMs. In the area that we knew really well and we could see just like transformative change hitting is sales and CRM, which is kind of, in a way, the original sort of B2B software category. So that's where we decided, to throw all of our resources into this space. And I've been there for a little while and continuing to go from there.
I'm super excited because back in the day, what RelateIQ tried to do is build an intelligent CRM. The Salesforce acquired it and killed it, right? Whenever a big company acquires a startup and doesn't keep the core, it's just a bad it's just bad for the customers, right? It's just bad for the users. And the more that is consolidated in large companies, the worse it gets because it's a monopoly of crappy user experiences. Yeah. So this is great. I'm glad you're working on this problem. So Aiden, what's it like going from a researcher to a startup founder and CEO? What has been your top lessons here?
In some ways, it's very similar. Like you're sat in front of really complex problems that you don't know how to solve, and you're forced to work through them. In other ways, it's just a completely different category. One of them being that most of my time is spent on very, I would say like, how would I describe my role? I'm like a recruiter, a salesperson, really an HR person. And a lot of my time is spent on these concerns, which is very different than when I was training neural nets at Oxford or in Toronto. So yeah, I would say the transition was surprisingly smooth given how different those two settings are. I think I've always had an appreciation for organizations, their construction, designing healthy processes that scale, and then ultimately just like working on a mission that I found all consuming. I remember at U of T, when I was just getting into AI and deep learning, I would just spend all my time thinking about AI. I would take research papers with me into the gym, and in between sets, I'd be reading them every single spare moment that I got. I was just trying to consume knowledge and contribute to the broader research community. And so that sort of like just all enthralled, I don't know, posture towards something. I think it was very familiar with Cohere. Like I really do believe we work on the most interesting contemporary technology project of our time.
When passion meets profession, you become Michael Jackson. It's hard to find that purpose, but when you do, it's a big driving force. And I find that you end up learning on the fly and you end up doing whatever it takes to move that purpose forward. Now, with generative AI being such a buzz in the last year or so, and prior to that, it was blockchain and crypto. It seems like everyone has shifted from being blockchain and crypto experts to generative AI experts. So I want to start this with some humor. What's you guys' take, especially the VCs? So,
what do you think, Naim?
It's been funny. I think, and Aiden, we probably share a similar experience here, where like you had a very small group of people that were talking about this stuff 3-4 years ago, and obviously, like, Aiden was a day zero guy there. I was a day one, maybe day two guy there. But like there was a small cohort of people that were sort of talking about this stuff. But it was still, people were amazed when some of these first big advances happened, but it was still like just like off in a corner. And then all of a sudden in the last, like, especially in the last 7 months, just like the world has exploded on it. And I think one of the things that's cracked me up was how quickly everybody became an expert in it. And I was like, because what was thematic, and correct me if you disagree, Aiden, but I think what I loved about kind of the early days, let's say, and I'm sounding like a hipster here, but like what I liked about those days was there was this humility of like, we have no idea. We're still trying to grasp our minds around what's possible here. And even the people who are at the bleeding edge of the tech were still like, it was still learning. Every day was just learning. And so, yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. I think it's great that the world is turning their attention to, as Aidan says, I think I agree. It is the most important and the greatest leap forward, I think, in technology that we've seen in decades. At the same time, it is mesmerizing to see, the kind of blockchain crypto things start to appear. And you see it, certainly with VCs and stuff as well. But yeah, it's been funny.
Yeah.
It's great though when everyone's believing in your space. It just adds, I guess you will some things into existence, right?
It's true.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I think
so. There's
like the crypto folks. Like I really align with that perception, Naeem. I think the crypto folks, they're amazing marketers, right? Like they build momentum around something in an extraordinary way. And with crypto, that effort, unfortunately, has fallen quite flat or it's been quite impotent. I think that with AI, at least there's like a technology that is legitimately powering multi-billion user products, right? Like AI is like in prod and impacting people at the scale of our planet. And so maybe this time they're marketing something that can actually drive change and utility. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting to watch.
This is a pattern, right? Visibility, be as much as visible as you can, wills things into existence. Then you gain some credibility, and then finally you make some money. So visibility, credibility, and profitability. But there's a lot of buzzwords here: AI, generative AI, ML, DL, NLP, LLM. Why don't you guys give us the definitions, the differences, and the hierarchy?
The definitions. Okay. Pick one for us to define.
Maybe just the flow of things, right? Like AI, NLP, LLM, how it all fits in.
Okay, sure. Naeem, I can take this if you
please do.
So artificial intelligence is like a huge umbrella around building systems that have intelligence in the same way that humans do in a variety of different tasks. Within that is machine learning, and this is one approach at getting at AI by getting machines to learn from data and improve over time. That's been, clearly the most successful effort. Within machine learning, there is deep learning, which is deep learning and neural networks, which is a particular approach to machine learning where it's kind of inspired by biology. You create these computer programs which, loosely inspired. They model off of neurons in the brain and connections in between those neurons, and you adjust those connections as you learn. And that's been wildly successful, very scalable. Okay, so now we're at deep learning and neural networks. Beneath that is like large language models. And so these are big neural nets, transformers in particular, at the moment, that consume tons of data, text data in a sequence, and learn to generate the next word. So they take in a bunch of words, and their job is just predict the next one. And then from that, predict the next one after that. From that, predict the next one after that. And that is kind of the backbone of the current revolution, or what we're calling generative AI. Generative AI is more broad, like it captures both the large language models and the generative image models, which aren't transformers and are a bit different. But yeah, my biased opinion is that the LLM side is what I'm interested in.
Awesome. Naeem, you want to add something to that?
No, I think that's as succinct as it gets. So I won't poison that definition.
Fantastic. So I read, I think, from a post you made or an interview, that LLMs are the new extended mind. Let's dive in. Different modes of understanding in LLMs, best practices to consider when using LLMs. Let's talk about this a second. Either of you who want to take it.
I mean, I can. So I think that there's a lot to talk about, and I think the characterization of extended mind is really interesting. I think the real there's a lot of talk about, what is AGI and where it is, where do the lines start to blur between like really powerful LLMs and general intelligence, and you start having these like action models and these different things. And I think what's interesting in the context of just like software and like kind of technology is that I think where LLMs are especially, it's almost a mischaracterization to think of them as language, as much as you now have this ability to reason on unstructured data. And that's something that has never been possible in the history of computing. And I think like that is the unlock that's like, and we still haven't really tapped into that. We're still in kind of the early days. And this is just speaking from the perspective of kind of companies that are applying this technology into applications, is it's still very heavily about, text generation, about like very, very rudimentary use cases. And I think what's interesting is we're now just starting to see the early days of people recognizing that like it's an extended mind in the sense that, if you look at every generation as like an individual thought that you can then chain together and build this like, this knowledge graph that is fascinating. And I think like we don't even know what that's going to be. And that's why I think like companies like Cohere are so, I think that we're nowhere close to the summit in terms of where we're at today. And I think companies like Cohere are going to be the AWSs of the next few decades. I think that it's just like a fundamentally new evolution in computing and the way that we think about computing by virtue of this tech. And I think that that's like the next leap forward from thinking of it as just like text generation, which I still see a lot of the sort of modern front end applications kind of lagging behind where I think at least like the actual technologists are thinking about it.
Aiden, what would you like to add to that? What are some potential use cases beyond text that people are not even thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, beyond text, multimodal is super interesting. I also think even within text or like kind of text domains, like tables, for instance, we throw away a lot on the internet. We're just consuming the bits that are straight up natural language strings, or also some code. But we throw away tables, we throw away a lot of structured information that could be really useful to learning and to the model's knowledge. And so tabular data, obviously I'm really excited about video. I think that we're going to have generative video models that are going to be pretty incredible quite soon. I'm most excited about text to GIF. I think that's like, that is one of the killer apps, like if Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, et cetera, if that's as popular as it is, text to GIF is going to be crazy.
I spent the weekend designing tattoos for my wife on Midjourney.
That's really cool. Yeah. So I think GIFs are going to be cool. I would love for there to be a generative voice API that is just like super high quality, like indistinguishable from human voice. I still haven't really found an offering that like totally is through on that topic. I don't know if you guys know anything, but I would really love to be able to put a voice to Cohere's models and hear it and chat to it. I think that would be really cool.
There's I don't know if you've seen 11 Labs. They might have been YC, but they just came out of stealth like maybe a month or two ago. Theirs were the first kind of voice models I've heard that were really strong. And we actually did this experiment where we paired their voice with Cohere to create like a podcast that was like fully generated with two people talking to each other. And it was like right at the edge of Uncanny Valley. Like you could see where it was kind of going.
That is insanity. Just entirely generated podcast with two people talking using Cohere.
Talking, and then you have the voices. Now you have things like Synthesia, which you can get like realistic humans. So you could have like a Joe Rogan podcast that's like completely AI generated feasibly. It wouldn't be perfect, but I think you could get pretty close to that with like even tech that's kind of there today.
That is super cool. So as we're looking at language models, right, what are some best practice to consider, especially for startups, founders playing with this?
This 11 Labs thing is super cool. So thank you for that. I'm gonna look into that. For best practices, I think like all the experience and intuition comes from actually using the models. So the first thing to do is just get in front of a playground, just start playing with the models, find their weak points, find ways to mitigate that. Familiarize yourself with like higher level frameworks like LangChain, for example, which do these sort of chaining or recursive operations. Those can be incredibly powerful, and they can also boost performance of the models very, very dramatically. So really look into those. And yeah, just engage in the community. Write about what you build, talk to others, find others who are building on the technology as well, and build a community around yourself of folks who are hacking this stuff.
Naeem, for you as a founder working on this, right, across different startups, what were some friction points you found?
I think that I actually think that the friction hasn't been in the tech itself. I think that we're fortunate that unlike other early technologies, most LLMs have come things have come very batteries included. Like Aiden was talking about having a good, even just like a good playground that you can kind of collaborate and interface with it. Like that's kind of been there from day one. And so you haven't really had these like technical roadblocks. I think that I think that now we're at a stage where, you have these, you have workflow things, you have things like LangChain, you have, as you start to think about scale and now there's a whole new set of infrastructure around like vector databases and the way you think about embeddings and all of that has to now like complement an existing architecture that you have of software. And like that towards the end of our work on Maker, that started to become a problem. And you're starting to see more instrumentation around that of like, how do you actually get this like increasingly sophisticated architecture to bring LLMs into the front end? And then how do you like integrate those with existing architecture? I think that this is also one of the places where startups get a big advantage, because for bigger companies to properly integrate the full extent and the full power of LLMs, I think there's a lot of like there's a decent amount of architecture work that has to go in to kind of integrate that into big kind of meaty legacy code bases. And now that we're in a situation where we're essentially building something from scratch, we're seeing the efficiencies of being able to be essentially like an LLM first software stack. So that's the only place where, and there's some companies now, I think like that are working on just like the entire infrastructure DevOps layer of LLMs. But I think that that's going to make things a lot easier and a lot more accessible.
Aiden, what about you? What do you think is going to be the next frontier in LLMs that will drive worldwide adoption, usability?
I think that action is a big one. So stuff like ChatGPT's plugins where they can go out and do work for you. Cohere is working on the same sort of stuff. Models that can control a web browser so that they can go out and search stuff up, do research, return with a summary, or book flights for you, buy stuff for you. So I think these models moving towards agents that can use tools to carry out tasks and do work on behalf of the user. I think that value unlock is like, that is the kind of crown jewel of the AI field. It's like automating work in a general sense, like going on a web browser. Anything you can accomplish by going on a web browser or using a computer, our model should be able to accomplish.
This is unbelievable. So in terms of use cases then, right? There's always going to be the innovators, the early adopters like Naim, right? Naim, you were using this a couple years ago. And I still remember when I was at Boast, you got me early access to OpenAI. I think this might be 2020 even, right? And so for it to go mainstream though, people want to see results. What kind of results have companies seen from implementing it?
I think that you have like two sides to this. On one side, you had this whole like almost, I'm going to be a bit like a pejorative here, but almost like a cottage industry of GP, like LLM content generation companies that sort of emerged. And then not just in content, but just like across the board, you have these like very obvious, image generation things that have now been proliferating last few months, for example, right? It's like, oh, put in your photo, get an image back. And one thing that like our board partner at KV, Nikita, he has a really great way of thinking about this is that anytime there's a new wave in technology, you have the first couple of years of a lot of they're just like very gimmicky. And so you see lots of like really gimmicky things that are these flashes in the pan that are kind of coming in and out and in and out. I think the what people don't see is how much, I think like Aiden, you said that it's in production. I don't think people realize how much is in production. And how many like massive, even legacy, companies and products are now deeply embedding LLMs. And the adoption has also been very rapid. You would think enterprise is slow to the gate, but like, I know there's Canadian banks, which are famously slow to adopt things that are like, and I'm sure, Aiden, you played some role in that, but like they're integrating this stuff into, there's a like risk modeling stuff that you would typically expect would come 5-10 years after a technology cycle starts is now already happening. And that's, I think, what's really exciting is that like people are adopting this at an incredibly fast rate.
Fantastic. What are you seeing from your client base? Because you said, you guys are predominantly powering enterprises, both large and small. What are some use cases that are driving great optimism in this space?
I think, what are some use cases? Well, definitely dialogue as an interface is blowing up now. Like there's going to be some total resurfacing of the product space. I think consumers are going to start to expect that when they're interacting with a company, that there's an intelligent agent that they can interact with instead of having to call in to get something done, or instead of having to go through 10 layers of, GUI menus to find the thing that they want to accomplish. They just want to talk to something that's intelligent, understands them, and can actually, do the thing that they want to get done. So dialogue needs to be adopted all over the place. You'll do your banking via dialogue. You'll do your shopping via dialogue. You'll trade stocks using dialogue. I don't know. Everything is gonna change. And so organizations are grappling with that because there's consumer pressure and they need to get up to speed really quickly. And like Naeem says, there's just an insane urgency from like the largest companies on earth down to the smallest. This technology is just unlocking entirely new product opportunities, and everyone is trying to wrap their heads around what the implications to them in particular are. So yeah, we've seen that from our customer base in a big way. We're spending lots of time helping people think through what are some good initial projects for you to take on, what are some major transformations of your product so that you can have a lead and not get disrupted by someone who comes in, does it first, does it better, and then just wins the space. So yeah, I think the urgency has really stepped up, especially in the past 6 months.
If you don't step up the game, you're just going to be taken over by your competition, right? Imagine like you can transform the entire customer journey while you have like even in sales, you have people sending the same messages. You have in marketing, copy, creative, everything looks the same. Eventually, everybody looks the same. And what I've seen out there is it doesn't generate the same thing twice. And so it can differentiate, it can personalize. The more inputs it has, the more personalization comes into play, which helps you build stronger connections at scale with your customers. So I'm super excited. We touched on voice as being one area that people are not thinking about. It's all text. What are some other use cases that people are not thinking about, but generative AI can be a force multiplier for?
I mean, I'm just waiting for Aiden to release text to GIF. My reality is now bent on that.
That's a big one. That's the big one.
Yeah.
I think like everyone is thinking about where to apply this stuff. And I think that, like I was saying, dialogue is one of the true killer apps, but it goes beyond that. And there's more opportunities, the more multimodal mixing we have. So your ability to mix images and text and tables and video and audio, the more that you're able to mix those together, you unlock new use cases. And so, for instance, I mean, PDF documents, notoriously hard to parse and actually extract the content from. And by design, mixed media. They're also like one of the most popular document formats that exists. So we better be able to do intelligent tasks on top of those. I think our ability to manipulate and work with multimedia documents is really important from the standpoint of like unlocking value for enterprise. And so that's something that we're working on and is fairly near term, especially with, stuff like GPT-4 coming out that has image as an input support. So yeah, I mean, people should be looking forward to new modalities unlocking entirely new use cases.
Now, Aiden, do you see OpenAI and GPT as a big competitor, or is it co-opetition? How do you coexist with such a big player, given that you're also extremely well funded?
Yeah, well, next to them, our funding is not exactly massive, but at the same time, I think we're extremely competitive with them on the modeling front, on the go-to-market front. And, one thing that is really special and important strategically for Cohere is our independence. We're not beholden to, one of the large monopoly players. And so that lets us serve on any cloud environment. It lets us, choose our own roadmap. And I think we're many orders of magnitude more capital efficient than like nearly all of our competitors. And so that lets us be really strong players in the space while maintaining our independence and not having to rely on some sort of patron who might be, trying to get us to work on their problems or pushing us in one direction versus another. So yeah, we definitely compete with them. I have the utmost of respect for that team, and lots of my friends are there, and I think very highly of them technically. But I think Cohere, we swing way above our weight in terms of capital raised. And we are extremely competitive.
Just because we're all Canadian and we're all underdogs, I'm rooting for you, my man.
Yeah, we need all this.
And also Naeem's future depends on Cohere winning because he's mortgaged his life to make the only angel investment he's ever done.
Naim didn't tell me that when he was investing. He was just like, "Hey, can I give you a check?" And I was like, "I really would love to have his name." I didn't know there was this dire of a situation.
He probably listened to a Mark Andreessen interview somewhere. Can I just give you a check? And he's like, it rolls off the tongue. You gotta live the part before you can actually play it.
Gotta fake it till you make it.
100%. Awesome. So let's dive into the risks or downsides of this. We talked about a lot of the positives and what we're looking forward to, use cases, et cetera. But what are the risks or downsides?
I think that, and again, there's a lot of people that are I think thinking about, well, what are the ultimate risks of like AGI as you keep going down this path, and you're now having very real discussions amongst smart people about when does the Terminator show up, and like that world has emerged. I think what's going to be frightening is the fact that you will now be able to create processes. So, as Aiden said, like the next frontier, which we're already at, I think like you can already kind of get there, is with taking action. And you can now have LLMs that make decisions, and then based on those decisions go and perform actions. And then all that's left is you have to connect them to places that they can perform those actions. And I think that like what's going to be terrifying is when you suddenly have maybe not so responsible actors creating these large amounts of, completely non-deterministic, or not completely, but like at least partially non-deterministic processes that they don't even necessarily understand anymore. And that in a lot of ways is like where you get, the dangers of AI is what happens when you have security cameras that are now like making decisions, based on kind of the foundations of this tech. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that like, you run the risk of going down that path. And that's also why I think like open infrastructure is also so important, because if all of this technology ends up, kind of monopolized, then all your entire risk vector is sat in one place, and it will be abused. Whereas I think like actually having these conversations, actually people thinking about AI very responsibly, and I think that's potentially going to be a lot, going to be kind of critical. But that's just I think that's a very layman's perspective. I'd be curious to hear, Aiden, what you sort of think about.
Yeah, I was really disappointed by the AI pause letter. I think it's like fear mongering, and it's really leaning into some sort of like perfect storm of human imagination, the science fiction that we've all watched and loved, and then the actual technology that we're starting to build. I think it's super counterproductive, and it points in the opposite direction of the real risks, which are stuff like disinformation or spam and these sorts of applications. Of course, that was mentioned in the letter as one of the risks, but alongside and with equal legitimacy to some AI god emerging, eliminating humanity. So I really think that whole narrative is a very salient distraction for the public, and dangerous, especially for lawmakers who now have to try to grapple with the fact that there's this group of people saying it's a doomsday event, and that's very salient for the public who are perhaps less informed. But then the technologists are saying, well, actually that's detached from the reality of the technology. So I think it puts everyone in a really tough spot, and I think we should stay focused on the more tangible risks.
I mean, I think the real doomsday is the countries, let's say, that are kind of putting that hard block and not keeping up with that, to suddenly find themselves in a position where not so great actors are far ahead of them. And, I don't know if you guys are impacted, but just hearing what's happening in Italy, more Eurozone companies or countries. And it's just such a, imagine if you did that with the internet. Imagine there was a pause letter for the internet in the 80s and 90s. The entire world would be different. And I think it's a very, just like a deeply short-sighted and it's a shame, I think, given kind of the legacy of the internet and how it flourished, that you're now we barely started, and you're seeing, you're seeing this gatekeeping, you're seeing regulation with no, without, I think that it's that's probably a bigger risk than anything in terms of AI in the short term, at least.
The pioneers of the concept are now behaving like Luddites. I don't know what's happening here, but I was a bit turned off by that letter. So let's see where it goes. In terms of customer experiences though, right? You, Naeem, now you've experimented with a bunch of different things. How have you used it to personalize experiences for customers and drive loyalty?
I think that what's really unique about what you can do now with LLMs is that you can essentially make redundant most of the UI layer that drives modern software. So like if you think about, project management is the common example. Like, you have the age-old tools like Jira. There's a few other ones. Nobody's ever enjoyed working with any of these. But really all of these is like a front end to allow you to do some fairly basic things. Like you categorize tasks and you label things and you assign things. And it's just like, it's a multi-billion dollar like notebook effectively, right? To just kind of like manage and organize. And if you break that down, you could have LLMs and kind of AI powered with them automate the vast majority of this work. And so I think that like the entire UI layer of a lot of software suddenly starts to change, because like, why do you need all these things to interact with? Why do you need a mouse to go in and click on a label and change it to something when all of these things can just be done with like a relatively unsupervised AI? I think that like the chat interface is just the start of it. I think you're going to see like what I'm fascinated by is what happens to the OS in a post LLM age. Like the operating system that we use today are really just a variation of what you needed as a basic GUI to kind of manage files, right? Like that was the genesis of the modern operating system. What happens to the modern operating system when you build it from the ground up with LLMs? And you think like suddenly a lot of the things that you need to do, you don't need a mouse to do this kind of thing anymore. There are things that can happen automatically. I think you can think about it in a different way. In our case, like that's how we're thinking about the CRM. Is the CRM is the famous example of the piece of software that nobody likes to use. And all it does is just like organize contacts. We're essentially saying, well, what if you built a smart piece of software that could automate all of that? And kind of build an intelligence layer.
Definitely. Now, he had a sales call with DishNet, and he's like, people are waiting on the call. I got to drop him. We got a lot of meat from him. So let's carry this on. So in terms of then using it to build a competitive moat, how should founders think about it, right? Because every channel ultimately gets saturated, right? You looked at SDR, you looked at ad spend. It gets more and more costly to squeeze the same ROI from the same channels, right? So what is some advice in terms of building competitive moats around your startup for leveraging this technology? What have you seen out there?
I think that you can't build a moat around the AI, and you can't build a moat around the data behind the AI. That's, and you've seen some companies try to do that where they go out and they're like training their own sort of models, and there's a next generation of GPT that comes out, and suddenly that's entirely like, that's pointless basically. I think where you innovate and build moat is around the workflows that you actually build. And so like, you create smart workflows. So as an example on like what we're building is like analysis. To be able to gather data on your sales CRM is a famously difficult task. There's entire teams that are dedicated to this. You can now use LLMs so to the point where you can just take a natural language command and process data based on that. So you can just say, hey, show me all of my reps that hit ramp or are on ramp, or show me the folks who sold into enterprise that were like above quota over the last 2 quarters or whatever, and it'll translate that into analysis. Those workflows, I think, are where you build moat, because once you build those, then you'll start getting data of people using those workflows, and that'll just improve the workflows themselves. And that's where, like with Maker, that's where we saw moat start to kick in, as you almost have this like AI muscle memory that the product builds over time and gets better and better and better. It's very hard for a new entrant to kind of replicate.
Definitely. Now it begs also the question, right? A lot of the people who are not in tech ask, are we replacing humans with bots? What is your answer there? Because I feel there's always going to be last mile. Humans do use business with humans, and technology only enables humans. But what is your take? There's huge hue and cry on the ethics around it.
We're definitely replacing humans with bots. Like that, it's the tough pill to swallow, but that's the case with every new technology that's ever emerged, right? And if you shun that, then you put yourself at a risk to get left behind, right? And I think what's more important is not so much that the last mile left behind, but that what it does is yes, you're replacing a lot of different things, but you're introducing a whole new set of things, right? Like once you can, the innovation of the factory didn't eliminate jobs in the net, in the net new basis. And you're already seeing that with LLMs. If you really productize and take LLMs into production, yes, there's a lot of things that start to go away. So for instance, for us, a lot of the design work that we're doing now is powered by Midjourney. The work that we would previously work with designers or work on ourselves, we can now do with Midjourney, things like basic illustrations, logos, interface design. But this doesn't mean that we're no longer hiring designers. Instead, our designers are now able to take their time that they would otherwise be spending on logos to now think about the actual user experience. And so you just get abstracted to like a higher level. But at the end of the day, like if you're, there was a Reddit thread that went viral where there was like an animator and a 3D modeler that was like, is just having an existential crisis because suddenly the stuff that would take them weeks, you could now do in seconds in Midjourney. And that's a very real thing that we have to acknowledge, and it's no different than when the tractor was invented, when the steam engine was invented. We just have to figure out, and those who are impacted, we have to figure out how to best transition them to the new world of work.
Definitely, right? Every new technology creates new jobs. It may eliminate a few, but it creates dozens more. And we've seen this. And the only way to win is to embrace it, not fight it, right? A lot of people that complain, they complain about the system, but the way to win is to work within the system and accumulate power and wealth, and then change the system if you want, right? But not fight it because you're just holding back progress. How can businesses without extensive technical expertise get started? I mean, you have the benefit of being an engineer in the space, AI, with your background, but you see other founders around. How can they get started? How can other business leaders get started?
Yeah, I think it's good. Like the tooling is very accessible. You can jump in and sign up for a product like Cohere or OpenAI in a few seconds and start using their playground to play with it. Especially now that ChatGPT is connecting with plugins, in particular Zapier. I think you now have the ability in a no-code way to leverage a lot of this. Zapier has their natural language actions thing that they released recently, which was actually something we worked on way back in the day, but the technology just wasn't there yet. So it was really cool to see that finally come out. So I think that those are fairly accessible ways to get involved. There is if you really want to use it, there's a little bit of, coding and stuff that you need to do, but it's fairly simple, API wrangling that's getting easier by the day. I do think that the difference for startups is if you really want to be good at this stuff, you need to have an ML team. And there's been a lot of, I think that an ML team is increasingly, I think the ratio between software engineers and MLs is going to shrink. And you'll increasingly have a bigger and bigger ML and MLE team behind pure software products that are LLM based. Because, just there's all this infrastructure, all these new, kind of concepts and ways of working with LLMs. You need the right people in place to sort of do that. And a strong MLE team, I think, is the most valuable team in tech right now. And that's where most of our majority of our investments are in MLE. We're fortunate to have a really strong AI team. And that's an asymmetric advantage, I think.
Fantastic. In terms of the technical and infrastructural considerations companies should keep in mind when implementing these in their workflow? What have you found? What have you learned?
Yeah, I think, again, I think that too often people think of it as like, oh, it's a simple API call. You send an API call, you get some words back. And that's the LLM. And unfortunately, when you start doing that a lot, it becomes insanely complicated. So you can end up like retrofitting this, like your entire code base can your architecture looks weird. It's a model that you just lose track of. And very quickly, you'll start to have like, outputs that you don't even understand. And so I think that like, it's important to do the homework. So, Aiden mentioned LangChain, for instance. I think there's a whole suite of new, I hesitate to call it like workflow or ops tools, but they really are like fundamentally like workflow and operational paradigms to operationalize LLMs in the right way. And I think it's important to stay ahead of that, because if you just start like running API calls and getting words and doing stuff with them, it's a one-way ticket to insane inefficiencies. And we've seen where like we had legacy, LLM code on Maker that once we reworked the architecture of how we delivered that, we were able to increase, we had like a 90% reduction in latency, which for LLM stuff is like win or lose. Like if it takes ages to get a response back, your product is dead. So yeah, I think that's important. And again, you need a very strong MLE team. There's no, like, I don't think any software company, and I think any software company that doesn't invest in a strong ML team is gonna lose, regardless of how much or how little actual AI they have in this moment.
Awesome. That's some great advice here. Now let's switch to looking forward here. Tell us more about the innovations you guys are working on at Fiasco. Anything that you want to share? Anything you want to call attention to our audience?
Yeah, I think so. When we first started Fiasco, we were building kind of this layer on top of the CRM, almost like a chat GPT that sort of powers lives on top of the CRM. And there's a lot of these that have kind of come out over the last little while. And what we realized is a lot of the jobs that like sales teams do are you can automate 90% of that with LLMs. So, one example I gave was like data. You can make data analysis 100 times easier, where before you might need an entire data team just to like run analysis on your CRM data. You can now, with natural language, just ask. A sales leader can just ask any question about their sales data and just get charts and answers and analysis back. You can do things like on Fiasco, we automatically enrich every single contact live with contextual news and information to almost build this like real-time profile of any contact or any person that you're talking to. We automate data analysis. That's one of the biggest pain points. The historic, it's a pain point that has been there since the first, since the earliest days of CRM in the 90s, is reps don't like to input data. And when the data is inputted, the data sucks. Like it's often broken, it's mislabeled. With AI, on Fiasco, the data, 90% of it is done automatically. It automatically updates data after your calls. It keeps data updated in sync in the background. It connects to your different systems. So that's ultimately where we decided that you could just fundamentally build a significantly more powerful, much easier to use CRM experience than what's been possible in the past. And I think that similar disruption is going to come for every major software category. I don't think people are going to be using Jira as we know it in 5 years. I think it's going to be like this fundamentally different, AI first product that's just, a much better way to work. And that's what we hope that we can build for CRM.
In terms of Cohere, as an investor in the company, Aiden had to drop off. He had a sales call and I said, hey, it's way more important. Don't be late for that. They were waiting for him. What are you looking forward to for them to release? What do you think what is exciting you there?
Yeah, so I think like the two areas, I think that like the actual language models have now gotten to a good place. You'll continue to improve, but I think that they're, you're hitting that top of the sort of power curve. I think like Aiden talked about it a little bit, but the multimodal stuff is where it gets really interesting is creating videos, audio, images, text, and doing it all from a single place and a single interface. I think that's where it's going to be really interesting. It sounds like they're kind of at the cutting edge trying to work on that stuff. So that's going to be really exciting.
Fantastic. Awesome. Now, your journey as a founder, what are your top lessons, unconventional advice, things that founders shouldn't ignore? Maybe top 3 things founders should do and top 3 things founders shouldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like grizzled founder at this point. It's been like 4 or 5 years. I've been through, have bootstrapped multi-million ARR, have raised, 30, 40, 50 million in funding, have done the very different swings. And I've also been fortunate to my entire career is just work at early stage, SaaS companies. So I've seen it from other perspectives as well. And I think that number one, don't stop going to the gym. And if you don't already go to the gym, start going to the gym, or something. Just find find something physical and make that your put your trigger finger on that. I think number 2 is I think what's happening right now is the fallout of years of VC hubris of kind of being addicted to money, and using that to sort of push, just bad products and bad things. And we haven't been, we've made the same mistakes in the past. And I think that you're seeing the reckoning happening right now. So I think ultimately just constantly being a state of, money scarcity, of believing that even if you have money, believing that you don't, and just thinking about value more than anything else. And I think finally, you need just good people is more important than anything else. If I were to go back, I wish somebody really overstated how important your early investors are in terms of not just these are people you're going to be spending almost as much time as you do with your family, and the people that you have around you make a night and day difference into whether your startup succeeds or not. And a lot of the successes that we had were almost always because we had the right people in the room. And a lot of the, I'll say not so successful things were from just not having the right people in the room I think that especially as an early founder, that advice, just being able to get a second, third perspective outside of your own echo chamber is absolutely essential to succeeding.
Definitely. I can't say that enough, right? A lot of people say life is not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I truly believe that life and business is neither about the destination nor the journey, but it's about the companions who you're with. You're the sum of the people around you, the people who you're with impact your mental health, your physical being in a great way, right? You could be with toxic people and be miserable with all the money in the world, or you could be with people who open your mind and put you in a positive frame of mind, and you feel like you're on cloud 9 every single day. Yeah. Awesome. This has been great. Any books or resources, anything you recommend that has been super helpful to you?
In terms of LLMs in particular, or
in terms of anything, things that have shaped your journey as a founder?
My favorite book recommendations, there's 2 that I always recommend that I love. One is How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. And it's not,
I got to read that.
It's an amazing book. And just I think about the mentality of the hustle. And the other one, which I think is probably my all-time favorite book, is The Autobiography of Malcolm X. So that is the one book that I have copies of that I try to give to people wherever I can. Not specific to founders, but I think that it's there's a lot to draw from. Those will be my two book recommendations. I am completely inactive across all social channels. I have a LinkedIn that I pop into once in a while. But otherwise, we have a wait list on Fiasco.ai. That's probably the best way to kind of keep in touch with everything.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll hopefully be coming out of alpha in the next month or two. But yeah, continuing to build in the lab and work with our early design partners and customers.
Awesome. And Aidan Gomez is semi-active on LinkedIn. Actually, he's quite active on LinkedIn.
He's active. He's got really good social game. He puts me to shame.
Yeah, he's got a great social game. He's all over the press. So you can follow Aidan Gomez on LinkedIn. It's AIDANGOMEZ. And his company is Cohere. It's COHERE.ai, Cohere.ai. They're a pioneer in the language AI space that you can use to supercharge your company. It's going to take the buzzwords that are circulating and put it into action at your company. That's the easy way to say it.
I had somebody add me today on LinkedIn, and their headline was Web 2, Web 3, crypto, blockchain, generative AI. And that was a very surreal moment.
I know a bunch of people who were blockchain crypto experts that now changed the headline to AI experts. And prior to that, they were fintech experts.
Fintech, that was the other one. Yeah, fintech.
And so there's going to be people that come and go with the seasons, but
I think Aiden put it a great way. They're great marketers, and that's not a bad problem to have. And I think finally they're equipped with real value products instead of snake oil. So that is true, right? They're great marketers, and now they're driving buzz around a space that is not only heating up, but it's much needed. And this technology, the innovations are going to drive the future of the universe. And but you also get these people that jump from one trend to the next trend, the trend jumpers. Ultimately, the people that win are going to be those who persevere and just show up day in, day out. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me, my man. I'm going to see you in Dubai. See you in Dubai later this week. Yes, sir.
Love and peace.
Yes, sir. Sounds good, brother. Thank you.
Take care.
I need some traction.